I want to dig deeper with two expert voices, Paola Ramos, the former deputy director of Hispanic media for Hillary Clinton and an MSNBC contributor. Duncan Wood is vice president for strategy and new initiatives and senior advisor to the Wilson Center's Mexico Institute. He spent nearly 2 decades as a professor in Mexico City and regularly gives testimony to Congress on U.S.-Mexico relations. So it's great to have both of your voices with us right now. Duncan, first, I want to get your reaction to what we just saw Gabe show us, the little snapshots into the life that people are trying to flee, the devastation, the violence, but also if you can put it into the context for us of the meeting that is just getting underway or about to get underway between the vice president and the Mexican president.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm speaking to you from Mexico City because I've been down here for a few days observing the elections here that took place over the weekend. And I have to say that here in Mexico City, just as in Washington, there is a regrettable lack of understanding of that reality on the ground. As your colleague just showed, I mean, this is a humanitarian tragedy. People are moving up, and I'm not saying that justifies illegal immigration. I'm just saying that there needs to be more attention paid to this. Those immigrants, those migrants who are trapped in Mexico are not just living in deplorable conditions, they're prey to organized crime. And we all know that organized crime is a major issue in Mexico, and in particular in the north of the country up by the border. So these people are highly vulnerable, and the earlier that we can help them in one way or other, the better. Now, having said that, I think that the folks on the Biden team who are dealing with this situation, they do understand that. You know, I know them personally. They have been down there themselves, even though that there has been criticism of Vice President Harris not going. And there is a willingness on the part of the Biden team to negotiate and to collaborate with Mexico to try to prevent this. And that's where we come to today's meeting, which is that we are in a very delicate situation in the bilateral relationship between the United States and Mexico. We have a Mexican president who was very happy to collaborate with President Trump. But since Trump has left office, we've seen many more nationalistic messages being sent from the Mexican president, from the Mexican government, saying to the United States, stay out of our business, at the same time as they say they're willing to continue collaborating on migration. And so it's a delicately balanced relationship. And what I understand of today's meeting is that Vice President Harris is here to try to continue to construct a positive and forward-looking relationship. It's going to be very, very different than the conversation she had in Central America, where she was much tougher. With Mexico, which is an essential partner in trying to get a handle on this migration crisis, I think we're going to see a much more softly approach, at least for now. Once we've got to the point where there is a solid relationship, where it is a relationship that operates on multiple levels, then I think the United States can begin to push harder. But for now, the United States desperately needs ongoing collaboration from Andrés Manuel López Obrador and his government in Mexico.
Yeah, and Paola, as Duncan points out, this is a hot potato here at home in the United States. When you talk about, for example, the decision not to go to the border, the way that Vice President Harris answered that question, immediately, the reaction started, including from Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, who, among other things, tweeted in part, "We can't help set someone's house on fire and then blame them for fleeing." And then you have this other pressure point, which is the Quinnipiac poll from mid-May showing President Biden underwater when it comes to immigration compared to other issues like coronavirus and the economy. And some of those numbers, we have even more updated numbers, which are even stronger for the president. So obviously, you can't please everyone. We all know how long immigration has been a hot potato. But let me get your take on how you think the administration is handling this issue so far.
I mean, I think when you say such a blunt comment like, do not come to this country, I think that statement is simply completely detached from the reality on the ground that we just heard, but also is detached from U.S. law and international law, right? I think what Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez was trying to say is that by our standards, every single human being has a legal right to seek asylum in this country, right? That is what we stand for. That has always been the story of this country. And so there is some form of detachment between what we heard from the vice president and the reality. She's in Mexico right now. Mexico in this moment is the second most dangerous country in the world for transgender folks. Mexico has the second highest total rate of femicides in all of Latin America and the Caribbean. Every single day, 95 people are murdered in Mexico. Every single day. And just during the campaign season that Mexico just had, there's been at least 90 politicians that have died. And so as long as that is a reality, as long as fear exists, as long as human people want to survive, migrants will come to this country. And so perhaps the question that is being reflected in the polls that you're seeing, where people are dissatisfied with the president's approach to immigration, perhaps it's because we're asking the wrong question. Perhaps it shouldn't be so much, why are people coming to this country? But people, perhaps from the left, want a different question, which is, how can we welcome in a better way? How can we receive migrants in a better way? And I think it's that lack of definition where he's being too tough for Democrats and perhaps not tough enough for Republicans. It's that lack of definition that I think is being reflected in the polls.
And let me play, because I don't want to just paraphrase it, I want to play more of Vice President Harris's exclusive interview with our own Lester Holt about the form of pressure she's facing with the calls for her to visit the border. Take a listen.
We are going to the border. We've been to the border. So this whole thing about the border, we've been to the border. We've been to the border.
You haven't been to the border.
And I haven't been to Europe. My focus is dealing with the root causes of migration. There may be some who think that that is not important, but it is my firm belief that if we care about what's happening at the border, we better care about the root causes and address them.
I mean, obviously, Paola, addressing the root causes is, of course, critical. I guess, does that mean you ignore the border or you can't do both at the same time? I mean, is there something to be said about the visual of the vice president at the border, considering how important, or are we making too much of this?
No, I think it's important. I mean, I think what she's doing is incredibly important. But I think, once again, when you're telling people to not come to this border, then perhaps it is a good idea to go to the border and ask the same question. Ask the migrants that same question. Why did you trek? Why did you go through this incredibly treacherous journey to come to our border? And I think not only visually is it important, not only politically it's important, but I think the vice president, as the daughter of immigrants, I think she is the right person, the most important messenger that we can possibly have to have those conversations at the border.
Paola Ramos, Duncan Wood, thanks to both of you.